Hello, my name is Peter Parfitt. Welcome to the New Brick Workshop. I'm continuing the whole table and we're just about to do the first bit of gluing up, and it's the sides I'm going to glue up. After this I'll show you how to go about the domino work, which will bring the two sides together to make a proper frame. Now you will remember in my previous video I said how important it is to remember which is the front, back, the face, side and so on. And for these side pieces I'm looking for something with a back and a front, and also a bit of this rectangle which joins, and either left and left or right and right. So this is a pair, and that's how it's going to go together, and this is the outer face. And so I now take it from there, open it out clockwise, anti-clockwise, so that that's the outer face and that's the outer face. I'll put the glue in, and I'll then get one of these pieces in and also one of the bottom rails. Now I have got some lukewarm water here and a sponge for any excess glue should I have a whoopsie. And remember the dominoes are going to go first of all into the two rails. I'm doing my best not to put a ridiculous amount of glue on because excess glue will just ooze out and it becomes a little bit of a nuisance. I'm just going to do my very best to put the right amount. And anybody knows how to put the right amount of glue in is a genius. Now the beauty of domino joints is that when you bring them up tight, they generally come together pretty jolly square. Now all domino joints have got a bit of wiggle room, and it's beautifully flush there, but not quite there, but only by a tiny bit. So I just put a piece of wood there. I'm going to try and encourage this back into place by using a clamp. Now this should just about do it. There it is, coming up nicely. And the other way of encouraging it to be nice and flush is to give it a little tap. That's beautifully flush there. So I'll put the clamps back on now, and that's super duper. So I'm happy with that. I'm just going to deal with a tiny bit of excess glue. One of the things I do, it's not an old credit card, but it's something similar, an old membership card of some sort. And I've cut it through, so I've got a nice square sharp edge here, and that's quite useful for getting glue off cleanly. And what I do is take the glue off with that, then when I've done that, give it a little wipe. And there's a very tiny bit here, hardly anything to worry about. Let's best get it done at this stage. That looks pretty good. There's a generous amount just here. That comes off quite easily. Use the old sponge and then just dry off the excess moisture. And that will dry completely overnight, and I can take the clamps off after about 20 minutes. Now I'm using these Accuride runners in a particular way for this whole table, and part of that requires me to just inset the frame of the runners in here at the front and a little bit at the back. I've put a padding piece here so that when I've done the little recess here and here, I've got one flat surface for the runners to sit in. So in order to make a really good job, I've made a template, and I've worked out where my template should go. I reference it actually off the back because then that's flush there, and a particular distance from the front. And I've set my router up as follows. I've put in one of the UJK guide bushes. In this case it's a 10mm diameter one, and I've got a 6mm diameter cutter. And when I made my template I knew exactly what offset I would require in order to cut the right size hole. And this is a rather scruffy example, but I have ages ago produced these offset tables for this type of router work, and I'm more than happy to send a copy to you if you send me your email address. When you put this into the router, you have to use a mandrel to make sure everything is centered. So anyway, I've set myself up. I'm now going to do that little bit of cutting at each end to allow these runners to fit in. So I'm all set up. I've got my plunge set to exactly the right depth. And I'm just going to follow this around. And before you take the template off, make sure that you've not left any tiny bits. I've just got a tiny bit there and a tiny bit there to take off. So I can now release my template. This is the front, and there you can see my runner will fit in absolutely perfectly. And I've done this because I want to make sure I've got this in the right place relative to the front, and by setting in like that, it makes it absolutely spot on. So I'm really pleased with that. Now the domino joints which are needed for the rails, both front and back, I could have actually done the cutting of the domino slots in the legs before I did the assembly at the stage you see in front of you. But I didn't think that that was the way I was going to go because I know that this trim stop, which you fit to the domino, will allow me to do some pretty accurate bits of work. Now the stock that I've used throughout for the rails is 20mm thick, and you may be aware that the centre of the cutter, no matter what cutter you have in, no matter what setting anywhere else, is 10mm from this face. So if you have a piece of wood and you push the domino machine against it like so, and then do a joint, then the centre of that joint will be 10mm from this face. And obviously we're going to set the joints in these at the centre as well. So in that case then we'd get everything lining up as it should. So with the trim stop, that allows me to centre the domino machine on the leg, and it actually allows me to go all the way back to here because this is a little way forward. Now I put pencil lines where this edge of the rails will go, and I've then planted this piece of wood and clamped it on that line. So now if I move the domino machine so it's flat against here, I will have a domino slot in exactly the right place. Now we're all set up, the piece of wood is nicely clamped, everything is nice and stable. Now when you're doing vertical plunge work with a domino, I suggest you always start the machine before you try and position it. You can move it out of the that So those two domino slots are done. I'll do the other leg, and these top ones are trivial. Now whilst I've got the trim stop on here, I'm going to move it down to this position. I'm going to make sure my height is adjusted correctly. So now with that height at 20, when I do the cut, that's going to be absolutely spot on in the centre of here. Now in order to make domino slots easier when doing them in the end, if your stock is 20mm or less, then the stock has to overhang the bench because otherwise you'll get grounding and so on. And as I'm spot on 20, I'm letting it overhang. I've got one of my Path hats which I made just there. Now this little gadget, the trim stop, is the best accessory that I've bought for the domino machine. And to do the top ones here, I've got a little pencil line at the centre there and there. I've got my domino still set on the 20 mark, which is the thickness of the rails that go across. And all I've got to do is to line up the crosshair here with that line and do my plunge. So that's my top two done, so I'm nearly ready for assembly. Now I have got to put domino slots in the frame for the rear rail, and it's going to go something like this. But I don't want to put a pencil mark on these partially finished pieces of the legs. So what I've done is I've stuck a piece of masking tape to each piece here, and I'm going to put a line across here which will be where the dominoes will go. And because I've got these clamped together, I can do the line on both pieces of wood at the same time. Now I have got one minor detail, and that is because I've set these drawer runners slightly lower than this rail, I'm going to have to just take a tiny bit of the rail away in order to provide clearance. I'm just drawing around there. Yes, slightly awkward as they are, these aren't really that difficult to trim out. I think a chisel is probably the easiest way. Now I'm just setting up the right of fence here. I've got a cutter in here, it's a 2-flute cutter, and I've set it so that one of the flutes, the one nearest this side, is actually absolutely in this direction. And I want to set this at 5mm from the fence. So I've got a 5mm drill bit. I'm going to place this against the fence, and then I can adjust this to and fro so it's just touching the cutter. So I'm now happy that I've set this at 5mm from the fence. So that's a useful little tip. So I can now do a little bit of trenching. At the back of the unit, I'm putting a piece of wood which will then close off the back of the drawer area. And I've got 2 long pieces to do, and I've also got to do each of these at the very back. And this is how the back will look, having done those channels in these pieces. And this piece will be fitted loose, with no glue, so that as things move around, as they always do with furniture or with wood, then there won't be a problem of stresses and strains causing this to crack. Now, on the subject of allowing for movement, when the top goes on here, there is a risk that it can move this way. The grain will be going that way, so it can expand and contract that way. Also, I have the problem that the top, as it is, and I can't fix it, is very slightly cupped. So I need to hold it down reasonably firmly, but allow for movement. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a channel all the way around the underside of the top in the frame. And then I have these little pieces, which you'll see in the next video, which have been made to hold the top on but allow for movement. So for now I just need to mark up where I need to cut the channel, which will take the ends of these fixing pieces. So I know that this is the back here, and therefore I'm going to need to put channel down there. This is the front, so I'm going to need to put a channel down there. And I've marked it with my little crayon here, and that then is reasonably foolproof. And there will be a little bit of channel here and here for 2 of these little fixing pieces, and ditto on the other end piece. I've now fitted on the fence to the right a piece of wood, goes along here, and it makes it a lot easier when you're writing across the straight surface when you get to near the ends, because sometimes because of that gap in the supplied fence you can do a little wiggle. So this helps that out, and I'm going to do 2 little slots here, 2 little slots on the other end frame, and then the slots in the other bits. And incidentally, this gadget I'm using to secure these pieces of wood is called a Xylus vice. They're not made anymore, unfortunately. If you can pick one up second-hand from eBay or wherever, then grab it if it's in good working order. They are really, really useful. So for these pieces which go left to right along the top, I'm making a channel all the way along. It seems to be the easiest way of doing it. Now I could have done that on the writer table, but as I had this writer already set up for the other operation, I thought I might just as well use it as it is. Right, I think I'm ready to start assembling everything now. And in order to help this back piece from staying mobile within the frame and not getting caught by the glue, I'm going to put a little coat of shellac on it. And this is actually French polish, but it's the same stuff really. And this will just help the glue not to adhere too much to the wood. And I said, I think it was in my last video about this stuff I use to protect the bench top. It's £4 a metre, it comes from Dunelm here in the UK. I don't know where else you might get it around the rest of the world, but it's really, really useful stuff. It may seem late in the day, but I just remembered to put these runners in at this stage because it might be just a little bit more awkward to do later on. That's really good. Excellent. Now here comes the tricky bit. It's getting this all in the right place. Let's see how it goes. Pretty good too. The squareness is absolutely perfect at the back. It's a fraction out at the front, but yeah, I'm not really sure that I'm worried about that. And I'll just finish the cleaning up of the glue. I've got a bit of paper. I've got something sharp to get into the little crevices. Well, that's it for this stage. I'm really pleased with the way it's come out. It's all come together very nicely. I'm going to leave the clamps on for about another 20 minutes. And then they'll come off, but I'm going to leave it overnight for the glue to really go off nicely. And then still to come, we've got the drawer and also the top to do. Many thanks for watching. Take care. Bye-bye.